I was driving back from Austin, Texas recently, and I was listening to all kinds of podcasts. I was mostly listening to podcasts about the quantum threat to Bitcoin, of course, but I also listened to a podcast from the Net Society, some folks I knew from my time in New York City covering the crypto scene. And I heard Priya Desai come on at the start of one of the most recent episodes, their Dr. Peptides episode. And she was talking about how she was in San Francisco and she visited this place called Frontier Tower. And you could tell it made a really big impact on her. So hear Priya from the start of that episode.
We're definitely in boom times. There's no question about that. And so the hacker houses are in full swing. A lot of people around. I went to Frontier Tower yesterday. That's where our event was. And honestly, I'm still thinking about it. It definitely felt like bleeding edge tech in that every floor was dedicated to something, a specific new emerging area of tech. So I got a tour. I went to the wet lab. That was an entire floor of people just tinkering, almost a school lab, which obviously it looked a little bit more real than that. At 9 p.m., people are doing science experiments. I went to the 3D printing lab. It was one of the 3D printers was the largest 3D printer I've ever seen. They have this psychedelic floor, and I overheard the conversation there. They were actually talking about like MDMA therapy. And what's interesting is every floor has like a floor leader that kind of manages it. What kind of reminds you of an RA in a dorm, and it just feels like really active and energized. Oh, the other thing I thought was crazy is they have a whole room where people are putting chips in their body. So they have someone literally putting chips. Yeah. So they have about 500 members of Frontier Tower, and like you pay $150 a seat to be a part of it.
So it's a Soho house for geeks.
Yeah. I mean, it was people that were fascinating to me.
One of the things she hints to on here that is very much a part of crypto culture becoming real, and it's not accidental with this Frontiers Tower story, it's totally intentional. This story is a part of a much bigger game plan of one of crypto's more obstreperous gurus, and that is Balaji Srinivasan. The tower is a part of his vision for tech people and crypto people to create what he calls network states. And since this podcast is as much about crypto culture as it is about the products and the technology and the companies, today I want to dive into the notion of network states and this specific case of a new project in San Francisco, this Frontier Tower that's aiming to reach 13 million people all over the world, instantiating crypto culture in actual buildings, in real vertical villages, and they've already got one going now. Hello. This is Brady Dale. I'm your host here on the Diamond Rhino Podcast. I'm a longtime crypto journalist, gone from CoinDesk to Axios, and now I'm writing my own newsletter, Front Stage Exit. This podcast is a part of that effort. I wrote the first book about Sam Bankman-Fried. It's called SBF. You can get it anywhere books are sold, but mainly Amazon. And I've been at this game of covering crypto for a very long time. Diamond Rhino is a sort of reported audio essay podcast. I take topics, I explore the internet for people talking about those topics, I put those together, and I give you a show. So now that you're listening, I hope that you will subscribe on Apple Podcasts, their iTunes platform, on Spotify, on Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. So quick note about how I do this. I go out, I find various pieces of audio about whatever it is I'm discussing. I clip them out. I put them into my overall audio essay. And this is probably obvious, but just so you know, I edit a lot of those clips. So I'll shrink them down. I'll cut off asides. I'll plunk things together. But I don't think I ever actually warp the intent of what anyone says. I try not to do that. So check me. All the sources for all my audio are in here. So let me know if you think I got anything wrong or warped anything. Check me and then wreck me if anything seems to be misleading to you, but I really don't think it is. That's not my intent. I don't have much of an agenda here other than to tell you about a part of the world that I find interesting. So the big context of Frontier Tower right now, beyond the crypto culture and the tech visionaryism, is just the pragmatic reality of cities in the world today. Real estate in urban areas, particularly commercial real estate, is cheap. The pandemic made it cheap. The pandemic finally caused a lot of us to cross the line into becoming the permanent work from home class. And so there's a lot fewer people in commercial buildings now, and that has dropped the value of these buildings precipitously. However, people in crypto, if you hadn't heard, have money, and they want to advance this crypto ideology, this crypto perspective, this crypto culture into the real world. So now is the time to do it, because the buildings might not be cheap forever. Crypto and people are all about going to the edges of things, the edges of technology, the edges of governance, the edges of ideas, the edges of philosophy. And that's something that Balaji Srinivasan has been pushing for a while now. He likes the idea of people like that coming together. He calls it network states. He wants the people of the internet to find each other and be together and collaborate in a big way, not just as companies, but as like societies. Network states are online communities that become IRL, real life, really be together. He's even written a book about it. And he described some of his latest thinking on this topic in a conversation with Jason Calacanis on his show This Week in Startups in 2025.
We're building a startup society that's also a template for other startup societies. And the way I think about it is this is the third type of thing: internet company, internet currency, and now internet community. If you go to like ns.com, you can see what we're doing. If you go to ns.com.
Pretty good domain name, ns.com.
ns.com, right?
Network state.
If you go to ns.com dashboard, right, /dashboard, you'll see more than 100 startup societies around the world. We have these online communities. People send, if you're watching this, you're spending a lot of time online. All our communications are online, but many of our friends are online and we don't see them in person, but we'd like to do that. So bringing those online communities together in person actually has a physical network effect. So we've unbundled the world onto the internet and everybody's alone at home. Now we rebundle the world into the physical world.
In fact, for Balaji, network states fit into one of his big ideas, and that's this notion of exit. And exit is very important to me. It's in the name of my newsletter, Front Stage Exit. I care about it a lot too. And he has this idea that maybe someday there could be like 1,000 cities around the world that become something close to their own states, of places that people could go to if they were dissatisfied with the traditional societies as we know them. In the conversation, he and Jason talk about Tesla's Star City in Texas. Balaji has set up a place in Malaysia on the piece of a giant unused property that he found. There's a story about that you can see in the show notes of this podcast. He wants to see a lot of these, and this Frontier Tower that Priya visited is one of those. It's right in the center of that goal. Now, this idea of exiting societies that aren't the society you're looking for isn't new. And Balaji knows this. He knows that he's building on something here. But a book that interested a lot of people in the crypto world that's worth mentioning here came out in 1997. It's called The Sovereign Individual. And it foresaw all kinds of things. Notably, it foresaw internet money, cryptocurrency. It saw that coming. It foresaw more flexible governments. It even foresaw what we might call online nations. And I actually already think that Bitcoin and Ethereum are already online nations. Now, obviously, they're not governments. They're not nation states, but they're nations. They're groups of people who see themselves as aligned, like an abstracted level just a little bit above family. And Balaji sees that too. And in The Sovereign Individual, there was this idea that nations might stop being linked to land. They might start being linked to people's money and how they organize themselves, and they could overlap and coexist around the world. Who knows if that's right? But Balaji argues that we now have more options for exit than we've ever had before. People have more options about the kind of state situation that they want to live in. And in fact, he contends that for Asian people, this idea of exiting and going to someplace else that you think you might prefer more is already pretty normal.
Imagine if at age 18 or age 21, you picked your country like you pick your college. But that's actually already the case for millions of people from Asia. Why? Asia, India, at age 21, they would apply for their master's degree at MIT or Stanford or what have you. Part of the reason to come to a crypto society or a network society is to improve your fiat passport. So lots of people who come from countries, they're meritorious, they're smart, right? We can get them worker visas, we can get them maybe to buy golden visas, things like that. we can let them see the world.
And so the kind of people he really wants to encourage to do that are the kind of people who are eager to get to that edge of technology and culture and etc. And all this brings us back to Priya. Priya is a friend of mine, I should note, and she's always interested in what the new thing is, what the cool thing is. And in particular, the thing that she always likes is culture, like the way culture is getting cooler and more artistic and creative people are finding new things to do. And that brings us back to this idea of the frontier. And you can see why she would be so excited about something like Frontier Towers. So there's a couple ways to look at this that I'll preview as we go into it. I like cities. I think it's good for people to live in cities. But I also think cities are not adapting super well to change right now. I think the pandemic revealed a lot of the weaknesses of the way cities are currently structured and just accelerated a process that we were probably going to get to eventually. And Christian Nagel, who's one of the co-founders of Frontier Tower, also spoke about this on the podcast Lit with Derek Sue. He pointed out that downtowns are just in bad shape right now. That's why the land is so cheap.
And I think it's happening in a time when actually the downtown areas of Western cities need to be completely reinvented. And what we're proposing is how that such a city could look like. Right now, commercial space is empty in downtown. People don't know what to do with it. At the time WeWork was starting, it was like super expensive. This wasn't a former WeWork, so the metrics don't add up, right? So like it is a substantial difference if you pay 1 million rent and need to get that back on the membership, or 10 million, right?
Yes.
So there's like a whole different game.
And we all know he's right about that. Commercial space is underutilized like crazy. He cites numbers of like many cities, there's at least 20% vacancy rates. And I know after the pandemic, it was like wildly worse than that, but still that's like way too much. I actually used to be a commercial real estate reporter in New York City, and like vacancy rates were like super low when I quit doing that. And it's wild that we're now at like over 20% rates in some places. We know all the things have changed. It's not just that people are working from home. People don't go to stores like they used to. People don't go out to buy things anymore. People don't go out as much as they used to. I went to a movie the night before recording this in my little town here in Pittsburgh. It was a popular movie. There was only 4 people in the theater. The vision of Frontier Tower is that a place isn't just the spot where you do work, but it's more like life. You have more of a tie to the spaces that you go to. The line between work and life becomes a lot fuzzier in this vision, which is something that might be super appealing to some people. For other folks, maybe not so much. To each their own, but there might be enough people who want this kind of thing, want this kind of lifestyle, that it could at least be a strong new contributor to the fabric of cities, something we don't really have right now. I'm not really sure how the Frontier Tower vision, which we'll go into in more detail, generally operationalizes for cities, but at least they are experimenting. It's a laboratory, it's a test, and we'll learn from it. It's different. But there are those out there who don't trust anything that comes from the tech community, especially things that come from people who are loud and opinionated as Balaji Srinivasan, super wealthy people. Taylor Lorenz is a reporter that the tech scene loves to hate. And I should note here, I know Taylor. We're like friends. We've been at some parties together. But she has stirred up a lot of pots, and she takes very strong stances on things. And she really cannot stand Balaji or the things Balaji does. And so she did a show recently on her YouTube show where she brought on this reporter, Gil Duran, last year, who wrote about how Balaji wants to set up a political outpost for people aligned with him in San Francisco and change the way the whole city is governed.
I just feel that people should know that this is something being talked about, proposed, and there's a vision here that goes beyond just clean streets and a sense of community.
Yeah, no, it's so dark. We mentioned actually previously on the podcast this idea of a city campus, and some of it sounds very idealistic, right? Like this community care and everybody living together, working together, maybe shared resources. Like that all sounds actually quite progressive and positive maybe for people looking to build community in San Francisco. But this sounds like almost like the bizarro world negative version of it.
Duran got exercise because he saw Balaji on a podcast where he talks about this whole notion of blues versus grays. I'm not sure how seriously to take Balaji on this literally. Maybe he was. A guy can get pretty angry. But what I didn't see Duran discover in his reporting, which I recognized immediately when I heard about this blue-gray dichotomy, is that What Balaji was talking about is this tension between two communities that was articulated 10 years ago on the Slate Star Codex blog, where in this great post, I will link to it in my show notes again. The title of it is, I Can Abide Anything Except for the Outgroup. So check it out. It's good. It's long, but it's worth a read. But one of the things he talks about there is people talk about America as divided between the blues and the reds, the Republicans and the Democrats. But he's like, it's not really as simple as that. There's also the grays, and the grays are like the socially liberal, but a little bit libertarian kind of techie people. And so that's what Balaji's talking about there. He might have just been trying to be dramatic. He's coming out of this from a perspective where a lot of people are really disturbed by the direction a lot of the country is going right now and the extremes that some corners in blue America have come to. And San Francisco is the epitome of that for many folks. And I'll just say for myself, as a guy who used to work in progressive organizing, I went to San Francisco. I've been there, several times, but the last time was 2018 or 2019. I'm not sure exactly. It was before the pandemic. And it was disgusting. It was awful. Lorenz responds to this idea of the network state vision from Balaji as dystopian, but I kind of thought San Francisco before the pandemic, and I guess during it I wasn't there, but that's what I heard, was pretty dystopian. There was tent cities everywhere. There was human feces on the sidewalk all over the place. It was not under control any longer. It wasn't the kind of place that most people would expect to live in. And there was a large part of the leadership of the city that kind of was weirdly glad or didn't want to do anything about it. I don't know. It didn't look good. So everybody's got their own idea of dystopia. It's just one of those things where it felt like, and it's felt like this many ways in this country lately, is ideology on one side or the other goes so far that things get unhinged. They're just not the normal standard of what people want in a living situation. Politically, it sounds like San Francisco is swinging back to normal life, the San Francisco I knew and liked when I visited there in 2007. All that sounds good to me. But the network state thing, bringing us back to where Priya started our conversation, our discussion today, is it's actually happening right now. It's not Balaji doing it, but it's someone who has heard his ideas and says like, yeah, sounds good to me. That's Frontier Tower. The left freaks out when the tech world wants to move a big vision, even if that vision is just for themselves, for their own group. I'm not really worried about that. I do have a concern about Frontier Tower, which we'll get to, but it's more a concern about good things staying good rather than doing some horrible thing to the world in some way. The point is, the network state has come to San Francisco. They've got raves in the basement. They got coffee in the penthouse. Either it's so over or we're so back. I guess it depends on where you sit. One of the ways you know that Frontier Tower is a big deal is because it's been covered by the New York Times, not once, but twice. It is a bit of a barometer of like what's grabbing the ruling class or whatever. So the two stories that have been in there is in the middle of last year, they had a big story about the robot fights in the basement. So one of the levels at Frontier Tower is devoted to robotics. And on a regular basis, they have these parties where like humanoid robots do like UFC style fighting while humans control them from the sidelines. So that got covered. And then more recently, there's a decent chance you heard about this Chinese peptide trend. And the reason you probably heard about that is because there was a rave devoted to Chinese peptides that took place in the basement of Frontier Tower. They have this epic basement that's fantastic for parties, apparently. That's what everyone says. I have not been to the tower. All of this is based on my reporting on it from afar. But yeah, that was a big story in the New York Times at the start of the year. One thing the New York Times didn't report, which I will just correct the record here, is that was the birthday party for Bone Condor on Twitter, also known as Chairman Burb. A very fun Twitter personality that you should all follow, but that was her birthday party. That was her big happening because her whole thing now is making happenings happen as a way to like bring people together, up the excitement, up collaboration. So the story of Frontier Tower goes back some years. The founders lived in Germany and they bought this really cheap building in Berlin. Again, another underutilized area. Jacob Jazga talks about that on the James of Arc YouTube show.
We invited all of our friends to co-live with us. We built a club in the basement, a bar in the first floor, a hostel in the second, and 35 people living above that.
And they ran it through their 20s. They built this community there that was self-governing and people could pay their rent by working in the nightclub, or they could just pay their rent, whatever. It was a cool vibe, and they had a great time doing it. It was a great way to spend their 20s, but eventually they decided they didn't want to do that forever.
So what we've done is we've implemented like self-governing structures to be able to give it to the community for them to self-organize without us being there to lead it all the time.
And people have just stuck around and kept doing the thing. And so they had this nice experience with realizing the community can manage itself, and they just let it keep going. They started exploring the world, and they went to some of these pop-up cities like Vitalik did Zuzalu. That's out. I think one of them is at one of those. And they went to some other ones, and it felt to them like this was this really invigorating thing. It reminded them of the space that they had built into Berlin, but it was like more than that. It was more about being on the frontier of tech and culture.
I'm not a nomad. And so I said, like there's no permanent space where I can go, where I can experience that. And also these pop-ups were in villages. And I'm a city person, right? I need the infrastructure. And this was actually the step where I said, like, you know what? Maybe it's time to go back to the roots and build a community.
And so he got together with the guy he started the place with Berlin in, and they were like, this is a good idea.
Right now is actually the perfect timing to making this happen. Because right now our cities are absolutely distressed. Right? Real estate, commercial real estate has 20%, 30% vacancy rates around the world in big cities. So right now is the time to actually go in and be able to buy distressed real estate and transform our cities. Because if we don't do this now, we will lock in the same structure of cities which we have until now. So basically a little bit of living and a lot of office space which is rented out to like big corporations.
That led them to San Francisco as Katya Yavlova, who is now their operations lead and sounds like she's been a friend of theirs for a long time, explained in a story that she told at another event talking about Frontier Tower and pitching it to people.
So, and then he came back and went to San Francisco because there is no better place for social and tech experiments than this city, and like the city that is coming back to life now with the AI boom. So he came back and in 7 months later in April, had the keys to the building.
So this place, it was founded by Jacob Jazga, Christian Nagel, and Christian Peters. Frontier Tower is really two companies. There's this real estate company that owns and manages the buildings, and then there's the tech platform that will make the whole nation work as a DAO. And so the reason these two things are split up is because VCs want to get in on the tech, then you also just need to have this real estate. And so they're two separate things, but by separating them, it makes it easier to bring the different kinds of investors in who want to do those different kinds of things. So what is it now? So, all right. So first of all, where it's located, like I said, it's in San Francisco. It's in the mid-market neighborhood at 6th and Market. This is the neighborhood that Twitter was once in. Twitter left there in 2019, and it has not been good since they left. That was an anchor tenant of the era. It gave it credibility. It was like a dangerous place for a long time. Then it got better. Then Twitter was there. Then Twitter was gone. And I don't know if it was necessarily dangerous precisely again, but it was falling apart. It was losing its shine. Things are not as good as they once were. They bought this 16-story building for $11 million, which is way below the prior price. And actually, let's bring another piece from Katya in here, giving the history of the building.
Fun fact, this building housed Burning Man headquarters for a decade. They moved out in 2014. Yeah, so it was the building has quite a history. It was built in 1906 after the famous big earthquake and fire in San Francisco. It housed WeWork and Burning Man before COVID. WeWork renovated the majority of the floors. Yeah, Burning Man was on the last 2 floors and music and arts floors. So I think the spirit is still there.
So it's cool that it was once a WeWork. This is an idea that kind of expands out from WeWork. It's way more than a co-working space. They hate it when you compare it to WeWork. But, you know, the way it is now, each floor is devoted to a particular community, a different idea. Apparently, one of the most popular floors is the crypto floor. And in fact, the crypto floor has its own Ethereum section, which is sponsored by the Ethereum Foundation. And Vitalik is an investor in the overall project as well, alongside Balaji. So, you know, there's different crypto people that are in the mix of this thing. And one thing I would definitely encourage doing is Frontier Tower has a YouTube page. There's not a ton on it yet. There's only a few videos on there, but you can get an idea of what it looks like in there and also what the people are like. And they're trying to show what the vibe is like. So I'll include that in the show notes too, their page on YouTube. Yakovleva also describes what it is by saying what it's not.
What is the Frontier Tower? So it's not an accelerator, it's not a coffee shop, not a co-working, not a restaurant, not a third space, not really a co-living yet, but maybe soon. It's also not a library. So it is a 16-story high-rise in the heart of San Francisco. It's Market Street with 6th Street in Soma.
And I'll say they really push back if anyone compares it to WeWork, and that makes sense to me. I need to push back too hard, but I worked at a WeWork, and it was a nice place. So it was like a good place to work and whatever. It had the stuff that you'd want. Sometimes it had cold brew coffee. A lot of times it had beer. They took the beer away while I was there. That's a bummer, but whatever. What it definitely wasn't, WeWork would talk about it, as like we work, we live, like whatever. There was no community at all. I hardly ever met anyone in the WeWork that I worked in New York City, and I would go to other WeWorks sometimes too, and I don't know. It was like being in a WeWork was like being in an elevator. People were nearby you, but it was weird to talk to them. It seems like it is very much not that way inside a Frontier Tower. And so, yeah, going back to Katya, she just describes what some of the biggest communities, some of the most popular floors are.
Tell you, okay, we do not have a spare floor for now. So it's like, what if I outcompete like the existing communities? For example, like the most popular ones we have are AI, human flourishing, and crypto. They have, I don't know, almost like 100 members each. So you're like, okay, challenging subject. I'm going to create my community, and then maybe I can move in. I'm like, okay, let's see, maybe we can do like one of the floors. But so again, it starts with the community.
Because they're trying to be a community, they're trying to be a nation. When you join Frontier Tower, you become a citizen. They call it a citizen, not like a member. They have to decide what it means to join this nation. Most nations people are just born into, but this is a nation that you join and you pay to be a part of. And so they are going to be a self-governing nation. They're going to be a DAO. And the citizens of Frontier Tower are already working on sorting out what that means. Like, what does it mean to be a citizen?
The idea of building like a community that is global, that is aligned, that is really like strong with each other, that spends a lot of time with each other, that feels aligned with each other, a place that is more than work. Like we're having elections, we're passing on like power. Like, I don't know, like right now already, there's a committee that decides on citizenships, right? So there's a committee now that got like $2,000 per day per month to spend on whatever they want to bring to the tower, and we'll increase that. So the idea is that become the finance ministry, scaling this. And this is also our scaling strategy, is to make it fully decentralized, meaning we have an intergovernmental layer that will be voted via DAO tokens, and that will like determine also the expansion. So it will be the people voting, do we want to include this tower to the network of towers or not? And so I think it will be like a completely different like feeling.
So that's the big picture. It's this co-working building that's more than a co-working building. It's a place for people to like really hang out and vibe together, for them to instantiate visions. One of the things they've explained on a lot of the podcasts I watched is every floor has a floor leader, and a part of that job of the floor leader is to like find people to come be in the floor. So it matters if lots of people want to join your robot floor, or your biohacking floor, or your crypto floor. The floor leaders that bring in lots of people and have the strongest communities, they will eventually profit from that. On other shows, they talk about how there will be financial incentives. You will get some shares of people's taxes, effectively, for the nation, the monthly rent that you pay to be a part of it. And so it pays to successfully bring people in. As Priya said, they kind of function your dorm hall captains or whatever, or your resident advisors, but this is a business effort for them. They're the people who know these communities and know the kinds of people in a given city who could contribute well to a space. And so they have an incentive to do that. And so let's talk about the citizens. There was one of the citizens who is very heavily involved, is named Lawrence Ion, and he's a biohacking longevity guy. He's one of the founders of Vita DAO, which is a longevity DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. And he has a vision of creating an intentional community of which he calls Vita City, which will be a city devoted to longevity. People will go there because they want to live in a very healthy way, and they will also go there because they want to create the future technology of health. He was on a podcast, a transhumanism podcast, where he talks about being a part of Frontier Tower is helpful for his endeavors.
We have amazing people here. It's just mind-blowing. I spend 99% of my time in the tower, I think. I just work, meet people, discuss amazing ideas, and sleep. the idea of a vertical village is it's not just a co-working space. We have labs here. We have healthy food. We're building a clinic. The idea is that everything you can find in a small town, you can find in this 16 floors.
And the other thing he talked about, which I think speaks more specifically to like the broader aim, like it's nice to have a good place to work, but he also says that in a place like this, you can do a better job of instantiating the culture that you want.
When you're in a community where all the food is healthy, right? It's easy to eat healthy by default, right? When other people exercising and so on, and they inspire me to also exercise and close my laptop and go join them, do some yoga or whatever there. We are social animals. The environment you're in shapes you a lot. And it's very hard if I'm by myself trying to have all these healthy habits.
Now, one thing I got to say for me, there's this one video on the YouTube channel where the people are talking about the community, and they talk about the community in such a smiley, glowing way. I'm a writer. I'm naturally antisocial, a little bit of a curmudgeon, but I do like the idea of people wanting to be together. I want to be clear. I think it's good. Unlike the folks we heard from the start, and we'll hear a little bit more from in a second, it is a little hard for me to think of something like this as actually scary. It's just like, I don't know, a different way for folks to live. It's good for us to have like multiple options for folks to live, but it is also true that these guys, these founders, they've got a big vision. They have a thing they want to do. Jacob Jazga, when he was on the podcast that I listened to, talked about how they need to grow fast and they need to do it now.
In a time where real estate is not distressed, like we will not be able to scale, right? So we need to achieve crazy scalability within the next 2, 3, 4 years, because this is our time frame. After that, like probably it will be over.
And Christian said the plan is to get to 13 million people. They are at 450 people right now, 450 citizens. They want to level that up to 13 million in like 2 or 3 years, really soon.
We really want to become this network society. So our vision is to have towers in all relevant places. Relevant meaning like where technological innovation, cultural innovation, political discourse, philosophical discourse happens. So here in San Francisco, there's a strong focus on frontier technologies because there's the city in it. But even here, we have like art and music, human flourishing. You've seen it.
Yeah.
We're trying to really like have the kind of like fullness of human experience covered in one tower. So in other cities, it's probably going to be like maybe like a bit more on like philosophy, like maybe some European cities, or a bit more on creative and film producing in like NA. But it will always be like this kind of like core technology and arts and music and human experience that will be like the two themes. So the goal is really to have them really aligned and mission bound with us, almost in a way like they see it as their like home, right? So they're like their nation state would be like then like emotionally Frontier Tower.
And on this idea of a home away from home, one quick note I want to make is for a while when I was in New York, I was hanging out with the effective altruists. That didn't last for me. I have trouble sticking to norms of communities, whatever. But I was hanging out with them for a while. And one of the things which was really cool about the effective altruists is they have a lot of gatherings on the reg, and then they also just hang out with each other all the rest of the time. It's like, it is like a nation. And one of the things that particularly made it like a nation is, I observed this a number of times while I was hanging out with them, is somebody would visit from out of town and just drop into the Effective Altruist New York Facebook page and be like, hey, I'm in town for a few days. Does anyone want to hang out? And people would. I'm not saying every effective altruist in town would come out if one person was in town, but you could usually find a handful of people to go get a beer with. If the person was somewhat famous in the community, of course, more people would turn up. There was the status level thing. But like anyone who was in could probably get some friends for an evening in New York. And that seemed like it'd be pretty nice. And it's not just like you would have some friends, but you would have a place that you could go all over the world to do work and hang around people who had a vision for the world somewhat like you, which I can understand why that would be compelling, especially in this age of global nomads. And so a part of what they are working on in order to scale is just how this whole self-governance thing should work.
The citizens came up with a code of conduct. Like, how do we want people like to be part of our community? Who should be part of our community and who should be not?
And so far, it seems like the people of San Francisco, which is the natural place to start as the birthplace of the global big tech thing, they are responding really well to the idea.
And we are now, within 6 months, we're able to have 450 paying citizens in the tower, right? And actually 45% of them chose to do the yearly membership instead of the monthly. So it's going great. Like, it was a full success.
And the other big recent news for Frontier Tower is the idea had always been for it to be like not just your workplace, but like your life, which that gets into like a little bit of cultiness, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they want people to feel like they have a place to be 100%, like a nation should provide. And so they also, for the people who want, they want to get into like living on the frontier too. And you can't live in the same buildings that you work in. That's just not how commercial spaces work in the US, mostly not in San Francisco. And so they have also recently bought a hotel, which they're converting into a frontier living space. And that's just a 15-minute walk away.
We were also in the process of converting some of the floors into co-living, because we believe that co-living is an existential part in creating self-governed vertical village for frontier technologies and arts and music. We were in contact with the city to actually get this approved. But while waiting, we were like, okay, you know what? We need it right now. Like, we have so much traction. We need to make sure that we have living space. So we went out and actually saw that there was a hotel for sale. As of now, and this is like the first time I'm publicly announcing it, as we have now taken ownership of a hotel in San Francisco, in Nob Hill, a very nice area, which with around 120 rooms, which was used as student housing before, for around 240 people.
So at the Frontier Tower in San Francisco, they've got floors devoted to things like biohacking, human flourishing, music and art. It's all good stuff. And the whole point of it all is for people to connect and collaborate. People interfacing is what leads to real productivity. That's why you can't just suddenly have a Bay Area in Des Moines. You need enough people. You need the infrastructure that makes people bump into each other. You need areas where people are working, where people like meet other developers in line at the coffee shop. That stuff is actually really powerful. And the most productive cities are the biggest cities and the cities that cause like the most interesting collisions between strangers or people who know each other. And those little random conversations people have really do add up to like growth and genius. And so they need to get more people in more spaces, and that will make the Frontier Tower community powerful. So expansion is moving, and it's happening really fast. They haven't said yet what their next city will be necessarily. They say they're focusing on San Francisco right now, but they're very clear that other cities are coming, and they need to get to a bunch of places all over the world.
But I actually think we're pretty much like ready to expand.
For another tower,
yes.
Or what do you mean?
Yeah, for other towers. So okay. We're looking at this, and then we think of expanding in the city actually, but also like to other cities, and just to see what like I'm so curious to see how does a Frontier Tower look like in LA? How does a Frontier Tower look like in New York? How does a Frontier look like in Europe or in Asia? Like, I just want to see it. Like, I think it's just going to be amazing.
And one point I want to make here, just having studied this to the degree that I have, and again, not having been there, I'm sure all kinds of cryptocurrencies show up. I'm sure a lot of Bitcoin owners are at Frontier Tower, but everything about this from the years I've covered this space is just, it has Ethereum vibes all over it. Just everything about it, just it looks like going to ETH Denver on some level, which is cool. And that's probably why the Ethereum Foundation invested a bit in the crypto floor of Frontier Tower to put its mark on it, because this is like an Ethereum thing. And if you have followed this space for a long time, you know that Ethereum is way more than a technological and financial substrate. It's a shelling point for a kind of person. And I think the Frontier Tower thing is another shelling point for basically the exact same kind of person. You know, what's so powerful about this shelling point is that it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. All that money and all that capital is, I would say, arguably way more powerful, at least more powerful more quickly than a really great book of ideas like Das Kapital or Being in Nothingness or Rawls's Theory of Justice. You know, what makes cryptocurrency so powerful and maybe, at least to some, dangerous is that it's an idea that became money. And when you have money, you can have buildings. So, okay. Criticisms, concerns, worries about Frontier Tower. Obviously, liberals and progressives are going to freak out about this kind of thing. They know they don't like it when rich people, especially crypto rich people, have ideas. Let's go back to Taylor Lorenz and Gil Duran.
It seems like the tech world, especially the Silicon Valley tech world, has gotten increasingly authoritarian in the past couple of years. And you've done such a great job covering this. But Balaji has talked about something called the network state. Can you explain what that is and what his political philosophy is?
Sure. The billionaires create their own countries and rule their own countries. And we see some efforts to do that all around the world, including here in Northern California. And that's what really got my interest. I wasn't paying attention to these things. It was a vague noise. One is you create an entirely new city that you govern, hopefully located in a country where the government's weak or corruptible, so you can buy independence or sovereignty. We saw they tried this in Honduras, a town called Prospera that they built. They're trying to build something called Praxis in the Mediterranean. There's a project here in Northern California called California Forever that's an effort by a lot of these same Balaji-connected people to create a new city here. So one of them is create your own country, create your own territory, rule it, a city or a state. The idea Balaji favors less is you take over existing governments through election. This is called voice. So creating your own country is called exit in the lingo of network state. And voice is when you stay and you fight and you take over a government. And that's what we see Gary Tan and Y Combinator trying to do right now in San Francisco, which is take over the city.
So it's hard not to roll your eyes a little bit at the idea of like this as authoritarian. Network states as authoritarian are just nothing so far, though obviously many authoritarian movements have started from just a bunch of guys in the back of a pub like BSing, of course. That is true. But at this point, come on. But Balaji does bring it out in people. He is very competitive. He's very vituperative. Fine. But when you study what Frontier Tower has made, it's just a bunch of nice hippies. It's hard to imagine tech hippies, not exactly hippies. It's just hard to imagine them ending up being that scary. But it's easy to fear the unknown. But now, this idea of the network state, this idea of Frontier Tower, is not so unknown. Now we knows what it looks like. It's just we don't know what it's going to look like at scale. So what makes me nervous about this going big so fast as it wants to is that it could get like a little culty, which is not to say I worry it will fully be a cult. There is a difference between culty and cults. I really doubt that anything about the frontier culture is going to eventually tell people to like no longer talk to people in their families again. That's the real, there's definitions of what a cult is, but that's a good sign you're in a cult. And when people are like, don't talk to people who aren't in our group, that's like a true cult. But there's culty. I used to work for Acorn. I don't know if you've heard of it. This is a progressive organization that was all over the country, very hardcore, very low pay. Acorn was super culty. It was not a cult, but it was super culty. You would work for Acorn and you would work so crazy hard for like not very much money. You would like work yourself to death. But it didn't become your whole life, but it still had that vibe. And one of the things with culty things is there starts to be like hierarchies and class levels. And there's always hierarchies. There's always class levels and everything. But like certain people would get a lot of power within this like small world. And that can just lead to like bad feelings and frustration and disappointment. There's no avoiding it. It's certainly going to happen. It's going to happen. That anything that scales ends up having stuff like that. The question is if the people doing it are in denial about it, that from like 450 people to 13 million people, everything will still taste atotally horizontal and there won't be any like super powerful leaders within it. If you're not conscious of it and aren't intentional about it, things might not be as good as they could be. And getting to 13 million people or even anything close to that really fast will feel very powerful for a lot of people. And power is tempting. So I guess I just worry about what that might do. And I also worry, and this is no worry like it's going to warp the world. It's just like, again, it's a concern about things living up to their potential because I think this is nice and I want it to be as nice as it could be. The other thing I worry about, and I think this is the thing that I worry about actually more, is this is clearly, it's already a scene and it's going to become more of a scene really quickly as it grows. And there's this writer, David Chapman, he has this website called Meaningness. he has been a part of a variety of nerdy, geeky, but like important scenes. And he has a good framework for kind of how they go wrong sometimes, or at least how they end up disappointing the people who created it all. And it's his geeks, mops, members of the public, basically the normies, and sociopaths model. The OK Banger podcast hosts Kristen Chong and Cameron Armstrong discussed this model on their show, and it's worth like hearing their take on it.
Let's describe the general shape of the article and what it's about.
Go ahead.
The article explains this phenomenon. Well, you start off with some people who are super geeks in the scene. It starts off quite niche. There is this little culture that's forming. If it does take off, then people who are new to the culture would come in and try to enjoy as well. So that's when the mobs come in. Eventually, the sociopaths would smell blood in the water, money or power or something that is self-serving, and they will also want to come in and join in the fun by masquerading as the geeks.
At some point, the culture gets infiltrated enough by these sociopaths that as a result, they extract what's there to be extracted, and then they leave when that's gone, or it's exhausted, or it goes mainstream, and it's not weird enough for the geeks to like anymore. And they're left clueless and sad and poor.
And I feel like this first part is pretty self-evident.
I actually disagree. I had been in like a handful of different groups where I was just like, I thought we had something special. And then it like got off. I truly did not understand it, or I didn't feel like I had a handle on it until I read this. Like it wasn't self-evident to me. This article, this kind of situation is to like, be vigilant. It doesn't mean be paranoid and immediately distrust everybody that comes into your group. But for me, in my previous social groups, including some that we're still in, I just didn't think about it at all. As a result, I was susceptible to these folks when they came in walking like a duck and talking like a duck when in fact they were a snake. I think just being aware of it is 70% of solving the problem.
I agree. I feel like I'm lucky in that I was pretty aware from the get-go, just because I'm pretty vigilant / paranoid.
So the good thing is the founders of Frontier Tower have founded a smaller community before. They must be aware of some of these dynamics. But a come to Jesus moment is going to come for this group if it has any success at all. It always does as things scale. If they get anywhere close to 13 million citizens, that's going to be a lot. Things will change a lot, and there's danger of like feelings of exclusion, of schisms, there's all kinds of possible things that might happen, which could be unfortunate. None of it's that bad. It'll all be okay. I just hope that people, when they build something lovely like this, I just hope they go into it with their eyes wide open, because movements are hard, man. Movements are hard. So I want the best for this whole thing. I just have to say this here because I've watched some of these things happen a bunch of times myself, and you can say like, oh, everybody knows that, and yet the same stories keep happening over and over. I'm covering this at the very beginning of the thing. It sounds neat to me, and I hope it remains neat. So, Frontier Tower is the beginning of a network state. Though it's just one village right now, one vertical village. We are so early. There's a woman I know from the crypto scene. Her name is Sarah Friend. She used to work at Consensus. She's done a bunch of things. She had a tweet years ago, something like, every utopia is someone else's dystopia. I think that's a useful thing to keep in mind. Frontier Tower sounds very cool. I want to go. The nice thing about this utopia is it's an utopia that you can opt into. It doesn't force itself on anyone, no matter what my friends in the progressive world might worry about. And yeah, I hope all the best for this. I love this idea of crypto culture becoming real. There was, on the internet, it was all, for a long time, the internet was all totally abstracted. It was just bits shooting around the world. It was just information. And then when cell phones came along, we started to have this era in which the bits started to influence atoms. We had 3D printers. We had Uber. You could summon a car to your location with the internet. The online world and the real world began to merge. And that's the same thing that we're seeing happening with digital money and the real world now. Obviously, because a lot of these people are wealthy, it has always had a lot of impacts on the world, but this is where like this structure of how blockchains are organized is becoming instantiated in actual space. The bits are becoming atoms in a more programmatic way, and that's exciting and it seems cool. Priya, after visiting there and hanging out more throughout the week, remained excited. So I got her to send me one more dispatch after having hung out there more following the one that she gave in the Net Society podcast. And here's what she had to say now that she's back in New York City.
People just hang out there at any time of day too. Like I think I was there until like 10 p.m. People were there all day, like different floors. I guess like the vibes of it is pretty scrappy too. It's like people are just moving furniture around. It's not like a clean, organized co-working space. But honestly, like it's the kind of stuff that I'm like, okay, well, if this is what some of the crypto whales want to do and foster, like I think I'm all for it. I think it's super unique. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting people, founders, companies that emerge from this type of inner city like network state. The number of events also, I mean, there was like, I had an event there and there was like 5 other events happening at the same time, bringing in different people around San Francisco. I don't know. I think it's quite a unique space. And beyond that, it's not just technology. It's like promoting arts and culture too. So they had like a makerspace floor and they had an arts and culture floor where people were like painting on easels. So I saw a lot of the work there, which obviously is exciting to me personally. I thought that Frontier Tower was just super compelling from a tinker point of view. Like for me, experimentation is always welcomed, and this was a community of people who are building at the edge, and it felt like hacky and a little bit of like the cypherpunk energy that got me excited about crypto at the beginning. Honestly, it's always awesome to be a part of like those early communities, like even like for example like the biohacking stuff, not necessarily for me, but just seeing how people are willing to experiment is always pretty eye-opening. Like I left being like, wow, that was actually like amazing.
So there we go. That's Frontier Tower. That's the latest foothold of the network state idea of cryptocurrency IRL as it exists right now. What did you think? Let me know. Leave a comment on the website. Send me an email. But in the meantime, I want you guys to be my network state. So subscribe on iTunes. And but even if you don't, I'm glad you were here for this. It was great to have you. And I think this is an exciting story and one that I want to keep watching. So, until we speak again, remember, it's a beautiful world out there. But encrypt your files. Every time I check, that's my Bitcoin's going up. Bitcoin's going up. Time I check the price, I see Bitcoin's falling, going. Well, every time I check the price, Bitcoin's going up. Every time I check the price, my Bitcoin's to the sky.